Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the foggy, torchlit alleyways of 1347, a year soaked in fear, superstition, and the total abandonment of bathing. Imagine the scent. The streets are slick with rain. The gutters carry more than just water. And in a tucked-away stone bathhouse, the steam swirls like mist around flickering oil lamps. You're there now, sitting on a low wooden bench, sweat clinging to your skin, breathing in the bitter blend of rosemary, mildew, and someone else's garlic breath. You look around. Naked figures move like ghosts in the haze. Someone coughs. Another scratches a rash that's probably not contagious. But no one here looks sure. That nervous energy? It's new. This place used to be for relaxing, gossiping, maybe even flirting. But now, the tension is thick. You can feel it in the air, like the warmth itself is carrying something else. Because people are whispering, saying steam opens your pores, saying that bathing doesn't just clean you, it makes you vulnerable. You can't see it, but they're talking about the miasma, the foul, invisible air said to carry death itself. And when you're wet, warm, and your skin is freshly scrubbed, that's when it slips in. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and what time it is where you're listening, or let me know what topic you'd like to fall asleep to next. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You reach for the wooden ladle beside the bath and pour water over your shoulder. It's warm, comforting, but somewhere outside, a church bell tolls, and it sounds more like a warning now. In the streets, plague rumors move faster than the rats. See, the idea that bathing could kill you wasn't just born out of fear. It came from a long, tangled history of ideas about health, sin, and the body. The warm bath that once represented cleansing, of both spirit and skin, was slowly transforming into something sinister. And by the end of this journey, you'll understand how soap and steam became something people actively avoided. Right now, though, you're just another person trying to rinse the day away, unaware that this will be the last bath you take for a very, very long time. You don't know it yet, but the year is about to split the world in half. Before and after. Before bathing was feared. And after, when even the suggestion of washing could earn you a suspicious glance or worse. You dry off with a scrap of linen that smells like old bread. The air is cooling around you now. You dress quickly, pulling on wool that scratches and sticks to your still damp skin. Outside, a breeze kicks up, and someone on the street corners their cloak tightly, muttering something about open pores. Sounds ridiculous, but for some reason it lingers, because there's something different in the air tonight. People are afraid, yes, but not of each other, not yet. They're afraid of something creeping and shapeless, something that doesn't knock on your door or brandish a sword, but seeps in through the skin. And if you're freshly bathed, you've basically flung your door wide open. Of course, this wasn't always the case. There was a time when bathing was celebrated, when bathhouses were places of rest, healing, and even community pride. The Romans practically built their empire on steam and soap. But by 1347, that legacy was unraveling fast. Doctors of the day, if you could call them that, started warning people to stay dry. They didn't have microscopes. They had humors. According to ancient medical theory, your body was ruled by 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Balance them and you were healthy. Throw them off and, well, the boils came next. And what disrupted those delicate fluids more than hot water? They believed steam could stir the humors, soften the body's defenses, and let the poison in. It's hard not to roll your eyes until you realize they were working with the best info they had. You pass a row of shuttered stalls as you walk home from the bathhouse. An herb seller quickly packs up her cart, rose petals, mint, maybe some crushed sage, and eyes you warily. She covers her nose as you approach. You're too clean, too fragrant, suspiciously vulnerable. You pass a group of townsfolk huddled around a priest, whispering about a family who took weekly baths and all fell sick. You want to laugh. You don't, because suddenly, you remember your neighbor hasn't opened her shutters in days. And last night, the rats were bolder than usual. So you tug your cloak tighter and duck your head. Steam clings to your hair, your skin is cooling. And that little voice creeps in, what if they're right? Historians still argue whether people in 1347 genuinely believed bathing was dangerous, or whether it was more about the panic of the moment, the strange ways people tried to explain the unexplainable. But the result was the same. The bathhouse was closing. Not by law, by fear. And as you curl up on a rough straw mattress, still damp under your tunic, your skin tingles a little from the cold, or maybe from something else. Your neighbor's dog is barking wildly again. The bell rings one more time, and the city exhales in fear. The next morning, the chill clings to you like last night's unease. The air smells faintly of wet earth, coal smoke, and the ever-present tang of something off. You stretch beneath your blanket, really just a woolen sack with aspirations, and listen to the groaning sounds of a city waking up while pretending everything's still fine. Your body still feels clean, which is suspicious in itself. You notice it immediately, that post-bath looseness in your limbs, the strange freshness in your skin. Feels exposed, vulnerable, and it's not just in your head, because down in the streets, whispers are turning into warnings. The belief spreading now is that bathing, especially hot bathing, opens the skin, not just physically but metaphorically, like you're cracking open a door that something dark might slip through. And in 1347, something dark had a very specific shape. The plague. You know it by now. The Black Death. The Great Mortality. Buboes. Fever. The sudden drop into unconsciousness. And no one, not priest, not noble, not farmer, knows exactly what causes it. But they have theories. And when people don't have science, they fill the gaps with fear, logic, and a touch of dramatic flair. One theory gaining traction. Cleanliness weakens your defenses. See, medieval folks believed in miasma, the idea that bad smells, foul air, or corrupted vapors cause disease. That was the dominant medical belief for centuries, and it had its own twisted logic. You smell a rotting body, you get sick. You walk through sewage-laced alleys, your stomach turns. Correlation equals causation. So when you bathe, when you cleanse your skin and strip away the protective layer of sweat, oil, and grime, you're making yourself a target. The clean body, they say, soaks up poisoned air like a dry sponge. Open pores are like gates swinging wide. Of course, we know germs don't work that way. But you, right now, you don't know what a germ is. You've never seen a microscope. You believe your body is governed by invisible forces. Humors, vapors, and divine wrath. You know the plague can leap street to street without touching a soul. It's not that big a stretch to think it might leap into your freshly scrubbed skin. And then there's the water itself. That same water that soothed your joints and loosened your muscles last night, it might not be safe. Bathing means exposure to communal tubs, shared towels, and water drawn from questionable sources. Streams that ran clear once now bubble past butcher scraps, urine, and the occasional bloated surprise. Bathhouses try to keep it fresh, adding herbs like rosemary, lavender, or basil. Some even toss in wine or vinegar to purify the mix. But let's be honest. One sniff and you know the truth. You're marinating in other people's misery. So what do you do instead? Well, in 1347, if you want to protect yourself, you avoid hot baths. You close your windows, stuff the cracks with linen soaked in vinegar, and carry a pomander, a small metal ball filled with cloves or musk, strapped to your belt like a stinky fashion statement. You might also stop sleeping near freshly washed people, or avoid the bathhouse entirely. And if someone knocks on your door looking pink-cheeked and damp, you keep the latch bolted. Of course, these shifts don't happen all at once. For centuries, bathing was still considered a path to health and virtue. It just got more complicated and more dangerous. Part of that change started with the way Christianity reshaped attitudes about the body. Back in Roman times, public bathhouses were civic jewels, giant marble spaces with heated pools, massage rooms, and mosaics that made your toes look fancy. They weren't just about hygiene, they were about pleasure, community, sometimes a little more than that. And the church noticed. Over time, Christian leaders began preaching modesty, restraint, and spiritual cleanliness over bodily pleasure. Bathhouses became suspect, not just as dens of disease, but as sinful distractions. If people were naked together, clearly they weren't just talking about the weather. You get the picture. So by the time plague hits, you already have centuries of tension built up, between the desire to be clean and the fear that doing so might invite physical or moral ruin. Bathing wasn't banned, but it wasn't exactly encouraged either. Now layer the plague on top of that. You're already nervous. Everyone is. The bells toll more often now, and the graveyard seems busier than the market. You hear new rules every day. Avoid cold food, don't touch frogs, sleep with your head pointing east. Is it superstition? Sure, but it's organized superstition. Feels like doing something, and not bathing? That's something. It's oddly empowering. It gives people a sense of control, like if you just stay dry and dirty, you might outlast your neighbors. The baker down the street, the one who scrubbed himself raw with lye soap last week, he hasn't opened his shutters since Tuesday. Historians still argue whether the fear of bathing was stronger in cities or villages. Some say rural communities clung to older, earthier cleaning methods. Others claim urban centers, with their tighter quarters and communal baths, were the first to flip. Either way, the pattern is clear. The more the plague spread, the less people wanted to touch water. Ironically, not everyone agreed. A few brave physicians actually recommended bathing to sweat out impurities, especially early in the disease. They argued that steam could open the pathways for healing. These ideas had roots in ancient Greek traditions. But good luck convincing anyone of that when half your town thinks water is a death sentence. So here you are. It's mid-morning now, and you're debating whether to pour a little water over your face. Just a splash. Maybe rinse your hands. You don't. Instead, you reach for the small pouch on your table. Inside, dried rose petals, mint, maybe even a scrap of citrus peel if you're lucky. You rub it between your fingers and dab the scent behind your ears. Not clean, just masked. And that's how life begins to change. No more baths. No more steamy evenings with friends and chatter and hot towels. Just a growing fear of water, of steam, of touch. Your pores, once opened in joy, now feel like doorways to doom. You get used to the smell. Not just your own, but everyone else's. At first, it's offensive, pungent, like onions left too long in a warm room, but then it fades into the background. A kind of humid funk that sticks to wool and clings to your nose hairs. You stop noticing it until you leave town, and the trees start smelling like trees again. But here, in the thick of it, you live in a fog of sweat, smoke, and rosemary sachets. You weren't born into this aversion to bathing. In fact, if you think back, your grandparents probably told stories of warm communal pools, of soft linens drying over heated stones, of entire towns gathering for bath days. And those weren't shameful. They were cherished. So how did we go from that to this? Well, the shift didn't happen overnight. You can trace it back to the early centuries after the fall of Rome. Once the great empire collapsed, those sprawling marble bathhouses, the ones with domed ceilings and underfloor heating, fell into disrepair. Infrastructure crumbled, aqueducts broke, and water became a luxury rather than a daily rite. Then came the church. To be fair, the church didn't ban bathing. They weren't monsters, but they were suspicious of it, especially the public, naked, mixed-gender kind. You get why. Bathhouses had a reputation for being lively. People didn't just clean themselves there, they socialized, schemed, flirted, gossiped, and yes, sometimes more. To early Christian leaders, that was dangerous territory. Nakedness, pleasure, heat, all things that could lead you astray. And when your spiritual health is on the line, maybe it's better to just rinse your hands in a basin and call it a day. But this wasn't a universal rule. In some monasteries, regular bathing was encouraged, though always in silence and modesty. And in Islamic cities like Cordoba or Baghdad, public bathhouses, hammams, flourished, blending cleanliness with spiritual purity. So it's not like everyone in the Middle Ages stank equally. Still, across much of Europe, a cultural chill set in. You begin to hear phrases like, cleanliness is next to godliness. But with a twist, spiritual cleanliness took priority. Your soul, not your skin, needed scrubbing. So by 1347, You live in a world where bathing is already complicated. And then the plague hits. Now the old warnings gain new weight. Every cough, every swollen neck, every sudden collapse adds fuel to the fire. And in the chaos, one message rises. Don't open your pores. It sounds ridiculous now, sure. But remember, you're working without microscopes, without germ theory. You've never heard the word bacteria. All you know is that people who visit the bathhouse keep disappearing. And maybe it's not the fleas or the rats. Maybe it's the steam. You start seeing bathhouses as death traps. Warm, wet places where the air lingers too long, where strangers sit too close, where sickness might cling to the walls like mildew. So the once thriving bathhouse in your district, it's now silent. You walk past it some nights just to remember. The windows are boarded. Ivy is creeping up the stone. The wooden sign still swings in the breeze, creaking. Inside, you imagine the echoes of laughter, the slap of water in basins, the gentle hiss of steam escaping cracks in the stone floor. All gone now, replaced by silence and suspicion. There are still a few people who bathe, secretly, cautiously, with boiled water and their doors locked tight. But they don't talk about it. Not anymore, because neighbors are watching. And the last thing you want during plague season is to seem unusual. So people adapt. They turn to dry hygiene, brushing their skin with cloth, rubbing scented oils into their armpits, sprinkling lavender on their hair. Some wear small bags of herbs around their necks, or stuff sweet-smelling plants in their sleeves and collars. It's not cleaning exactly, but it's not nothing either. And then there's the smoking. Yes, smoking. Not tobacco, not yet. But rather, people light bundles of herbs and waft the smoke around their bodies, their homes, even their food. They believe the smoke will drive out corrupted air and seal their pores shut. Doctors recommend strange mixtures. Bathe in vinegar or wine if you're rich. Rub garlic on your feet. Sleep with an onion in each corner of the room. These aren't jokes. They're desperate attempts to explain a world falling apart. And here's where it gets weirder. Because suddenly, being dirty becomes a virtue, a sign of caution, of spiritual resilience. Cleanliness starts to look reckless, dangerous, even vain. You don't want to stand out. You want to blend in. You want to survive. Historians still debate just how widespread this anti-bathing sentiment was. Some argue it's exaggerated, pointing to records of soap makers, perfumers, and physicians who still promoted washing. Others insist the fear was real and powerful, particularly in urban centers where the plague's grip was strongest. Either way, you live in a moment where every choice feels like a gamble. And bathing? That's too risky. So instead of water, you turn to ritual. You sweep your doorway with salt. You hang iron charms above your bed. You light a fire each morning, even in summer, to cleanse the air. You whisper prayers as you rub dried mint behind your ears. And when someone mentions the bathhouse, you change the subject. Because even the word bathing feels heavy now, like it might summon something. And deep down, you feel it too. You remember how vulnerable your skin felt after that last bath. How the air seemed colder. How your joints ached just a little more than usual. Was that the water or the fear? Hard to say, but the fear remains. And so you stop. You join the rest. You avoid water. You wear your stink like a shield. And in the long nights ahead, as bells toll and windows shudder, you begin to forget what clean even felt like. You don't even flinch now when someone mentions that their neighbor hasn't bathed in 6 months. You just nod. 6 months sounds reasonable, safe even. You yourself haven't touched hot water in weeks. Not since the evening mist started smelling different, like wet wool and something sourer. You'd rather not risk it. You've learned to layer your clothes instead. You add an extra tunic to catch the sweat. Linen under wool, wool under leather. It's uncomfortable, but it's also a barrier, a second skin. And as your pores tighten against the cold, you tell yourself, no openings, no plague. The popular belief, as you know by now, is that heat opens the body and lets bad air in. And a hot bath? That's practically begging for miasma to come tap dancing through your pores. But it's not just physical vulnerability. There's a deeper, almost moral undertone to it all now. The dirtier you are, the more cautious. The more you stink, the more serious you seem. People begin to equate foulness with virtue. Resisting the temptation of water becomes an act of discipline. This is especially true among the devout. You see monks in scratchy robes, fasting and praying, their skin cracked and their hair matted. Their odor precedes them, like a warning bell, but no one complains. On the contrary, some even say they smell holy. And maybe that's the strangest part of all. The idea that being clean is selfish. That to bathe while the world is dying is to indulge in vanity. It's not just dangerous, it's indecent. You walk through the market and notice it's less colorful than before. The fruit stalls are thinning out. Cloth merchants hawk darker shades now. Grays and browns that don't show stains. Nobody's buying lace or velvet. What's the point? You pass a group of children kicking a pig bladder around like a toy. One of them has soot on her cheeks, deliberate like war paint. You smile, sort of. That soot, someone once said, keeps sickness away, closes the skin, keeps the soul in. You don't believe everything you hear, of course. Not entirely. But when everyone's saying the same thing, it's hard not to absorb it. After all, you haven't caught the plague yet. And you haven't bathed. Coincidence? Some of your neighbors have gone even further. One woman you know has sealed every window in her home. She burns sage and rosemary constantly, until the walls are stained with soot and the air chokes. Her family hasn't bathed in a year. They wear the same clothes for days, sometimes weeks, and scrape their skin with wooden paddles instead of washing. They call it dry bathing. It's almost poetic in a bleak sort of way, like an echo of a forgotten ritual. And speaking of rituals, you've noticed a rise in strange combinations lately. A man in your street now sleeps with 4 garlic cloves in his boots. Another ties dried lizards above his bedpost. One apothecary sells purifying powders made of crushed pearls and, well, let's just say it includes ingredients best left unexamined. There's a feeling that doing something is better than nothing, even if that something is absurd. If someone said scrubbing yourself with moss from the north side of a gravestone cured plague, you'd probably try it. And yet, even among all the folk remedies and fumigations, there's one rule everyone follows. Don't bathe. It's become almost a civic duty. You remember when the bathhouse closed. The official story was that it was too expensive to keep warm. But everyone knew the truth. No one was going. People avoided the area entirely, crossing the street to steer clear of the heavy wooden doors and the smell of long damp wood. Historians still argue whether the fear of water was truly universal or just louder in certain regions. Some records suggest pockets of resistance, wealthy homes with private tubs, physicians quietly promoting therapeutic soaking. But public opinion was loud enough to drown them out. And in that silence, bathhouses vanished. Some were converted into storerooms. Others were abandoned altogether, left to crumble under ivy and rain. You peek through a crack in the shutters of one and see ghosts of steam. Wooden tubs still there, now dry. Mice nesting in the folds of old linen. What once smelled like lavender and lemon balm now smells like rot and damp stone. You sigh and keep walking. A few streets down, someone's shouting about vinegar. A merchant selling air-freshening waters, mixed with rose and spirits. It smells better than most people, at least. You buy a tiny vial, more out of habit than belief. A drop behind each ear, a little on your wrists. It won't clean you, but it'll keep your scent soft and floral. And that's good enough. For now. Funny how quickly you adapted. A few months ago, you'd have found this barbaric. Now it's life. You think of your younger self, standing in the bathhouse, shoulder deep in warm water, steam curling through your hair, skin flushed from heat and comfort. That memory feels almost decadent now. Like a dream. You miss it. You miss feeling clean. But you don't say that out loud. You don't want to be the person who longs for a bath. Not here. Not now. Because someone might hear you. And worse, they might agree. By now, even the idea of bathing feels distant. Like something that belonged to a gentler, more foolish version of you. A version who hadn't learned yet that warmth is dangerous, that water is risky, and that clean skin can be a curse. You still wash your hands, sometimes, but only with cold water. Only quickly, only when no one is looking. You dab at your face with a cloth, maybe once a week, careful not to linger too long. And your hair? Let's just say your hat does most of the heavy lifting these days. But despite all this, the city doesn't smell like death. It smells like strategy, a strange combination of clove, sweat, dried rosemary, and damp wool. Everyone's fighting in their own way. Everyone's adapting. Even the doctors. Of course, doctor is a generous term in 1347. Some are trained in universities. Others are self-proclaimed experts with a flair for dramatic cloaks and homemade ointments. Still, they're what people have, and they come bearing ideas. One such idea, that bathing, especially hot bathing, destroys your body's natural barrier, that the heat weakens your vital spirits, makes your skin too soft, your inner heat too exposed. And since the plague was believed to travel through the air in invisible poison clouds, any vulnerability was too much. You hear one physician say that bathing draws the sickness into the marrow. He says it with a serious face and a velvet-lined satchel of dried lemons. So people believe him. The theory is grounded in humoral medicine, that old Greco-Roman concept still dominating European thought. The body, they say, is ruled by 4 fluids: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Health is all about balance. Sickness? That's imbalance. And bathing? According to some, that throws everything off. It stirs the humors. It invites chaos into the system. If your inner fire is already struggling to fight off plague vapors, the last thing you want is to steam it out of you like a cooked goose. So instead, doctors recommend moderation. Wrap yourself in warm clothes, drink herbal infusions, maybe bleed just a little, for balance, of course, and avoid sudden changes in temperature. And for heaven's sake, don't bathe. Then again, some physicians disagree. A few say gentle bathing can open the passages for better circulation, that it can flush out corrupt humors, that warm water soothes the soul and purifies the blood. But those voices are quieter now, not because they're wrong, just because they're drowned out by the sound of funeral bells. You pass by one such bell now. It's tied to a cart. 2 men trundle it along cobbled streets, calling out prayers for the departed. You look away. You've learned not to look for too long. Not at the cart. Not at the bundle inside. And yet, even as the doctors warn you, even as fear builds, old habits die hard. You overhear someone whisper about a secret bath. A private room behind the tanner's shop, where hot stones heat a copper tub. Only trusted customers. Only at night. You imagine it. Just for a moment, the sensation of water on your skin, the hiss of steam, the feel of your shoulders finally truly relaxed. But then you remember, that's how it gets you. You tighten your scarf. You reapply your clove sachet. And you keep walking. Historians still puzzle over the paradox. Medieval people were obsessed with health and hygiene, but terrified of water. They believed in balance, in rituals, in sweet-smelling herbs and purified air. But they avoided the one thing that could actually wash away disease. It's tragic, but also oddly human, because when the world doesn't make sense, we cling to what feels like sense, to patterns, to old teachings, to whatever the doctor with the biggest hat says, and sometimes to dirt. You enter the apothecary. It smells like cinnamon and wet leather. You browse shelves of strange remedies: candied angelica root, dried rose hips, powdered horn. The shopkeeper offers you a small jar of cleansing earth. It's meant to be rubbed on your skin to draw out poisons. You ask what's in it. He leans in, lowers his voice, and says, "Crushed snails and holy ash, blessed twice." You buy it. You don't believe it, but you buy it anyway. That's what life is now. 1,000 tiny decisions, none of them certain. You do what you can. You avoid what you must. You try not to think about the last time you bathed, the warmth, the peace, the lightness you felt after, because remembering that is like remembering the smell of bread when you're starving. And as you step back into the street, you feel the chill again, not just in the air but in your thoughts, because despite everything, despite the fear, the rituals, the dirt, you miss the water. You miss being clean, and you wonder quietly, secretly, if this is really safer. or if you're just hiding from the truth. You shake the thought away. The doctor said don't bathe. The priest said don't tempt the plague. The street said don't be next. So you don't. You've started to notice how people walk differently now. Not just slower or more cautious, but less willing to touch the world around them. Fingers hover instead of grip. Arms stay tightly to the sides. No one leans against a wall. No one sits without inspecting the stone first. It's as if the very air is suspicious. And more than anything, they avoid warmth. Which is why even the act of boiling herbs feels risky. The rising steam from a kettle now looks dangerous. Not soothing, not healing, but like a signal flare for death. People say it thins the veil between the body and the vapors. That if you stand too close, open your mouth too wide, breathe in too deeply, you let it in. So instead of washing, they turn to strange substitutes. Take for example your friend Lucia, always a clean type before the plague. Now she scrapes her skin daily with a dried corn husk dipped in vinegar. She says it keeps the rot from setting in. She hasn't washed her hair in 3 weeks, but she dusts it with powdered mint and rabbit chalk. She looks fragrant, but clean? Not really. And she's not the only one. All across the city, people are inventing their own methods, ways to feel clean without bathing. You see merchants selling scented pastes, combinations of beeswax, crushed bay leaves, and something called dragon oil, which definitely smells more like onions than fire. They promise to seal the pores and fortify the flesh. You don't ask what's in them. You just apply and hope. Others swear by the dry rub, a method where you scour the body with coarse linen soaked in strong-smelling wine. They say it tightens the skin, makes you less absorbent. You try it once. It stings like a wasp and leaves you smelling like a spilled tavern. Still, you count it as a win. Then there are the more esoteric approaches. You pass a street healer, a man in robes 2 sizes too large, who offers air prayers. He claims they form an invisible barrier against sick air. He draws spirals in the air with a fennel stick and makes you breathe in rhythms. You don't feel cleaner, but your lungs ache less afterward. Historians often debate these rituals. Were they truly believed, or were they simply acts of comfort, ways to fill the void left by the absence of real answers? The truth is, both can be true. Because when you're living in a time when a simple bath could mean death, you turn to what makes you feel safe. Even if that's covering yourself in lemon peels and ash. And yet, despite all the fear, there are still bathhouses trying to stay open. You pass one on the far edge of town, where the laws are looser and the nerves a bit duller. The sign outside now reads, medicinal soaks only, limited steam, herbs available. Inside, they boil water in copper pots and pour it into tubs lined with linen. They only allow 1 person at a time. You hear they wipe the edges of the tubs with alcohol and recite prayers before and after every soak. You're tempted, but not enough, because your neighbor tried it. Once, she came back looking pale and blissful, said it was the first time she'd slept without nightmares. But the next day, she started coughing, and then her windows went dark. So no, not worth the risk. Instead, you visit the herb market. It's busier now than ever. Stalls are overflowing with sage bundles, thyme wreaths, and rosemary dipped in vinegar. A woman waves a jar of ground lavender under your nose and promises, you won't need to wash again this month. You buy it. You buy 3, because even if it doesn't work, it smells like something alive. And then there's the onion cure. It sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous, but people believe it. Place a raw onion in every room of your house. Change them daily. Some say the onions turn black when they've captured the sickness. Some even claim to have seen them hiss. You slice one open just to be sure. It looks like an onion. Still, you place it beside your bed that night. These aren't just remedies. They're rituals, anchors, and they grow more elaborate with each passing day. Some involve rubbing garlic on your feet every morning. Others require you to spit 3 times before entering a room. One man claims to have worn the same shirt for 89 days, and that it holds the sickness back. You don't challenge him. You just nod and make a mental note not to stand downwind. And perhaps the most peculiar remedy of all? Boiled basil socks. Yes, you heard that right. You take an old pair of wool socks, soak them in a strong basil infusion, let them dry in the sun, and wear them on alternating days. Supposedly, it pulls the heat sickness from your legs and grounds the soul. Lucia swears by them. She hasn't bathed in 2 months but claims her feet smell like a spring meadow. You don't check. You just ask for the recipe. Because when the rules of life change, you find comfort in doing something. Anything. Even if it's nonsense. Even if it's basil socks and ghost onions and fennel stick breathing spells. And when you finally get into bed that night, still unbathed, still afraid, you look around your room and feel strangely prepared. Not safe. Not exactly clean. But fortified. Your pores are sealed. Your air has been prayed over. Your onions are fresh. And that will have to do. The bathhouse isn't just abandoned now. It's cursed. No one says the word out loud, of course. But you can feel it in the way people cross the street when they pass it. How they avert their eyes. How children are yanked away from its worn stone steps like it's a pit of vipers. No one boards it up officially. No need. Fear does that all on its own. Once, it was a place of warmth, laughter, flickering lamplight on steam-slicked walls. Now, it sits hunched and silent, a mausoleum of former comfort. It smells like mildew and ash. The sign dangles from one bent nail. The door creaks without wind. And every so often, you think you see someone go in. Not many, just enough to keep the rumors alive. Did you hear? Someone whispers over the fish cart. The baker's boy went into the bathhouse. Next morning, gone. Just like that. They say the walls sweat sickness now. That the steam remembers every breath that passed through it. That even the stones are soaked with plague. It doesn't matter if it's true. Feels true. And in times like these, feelings are facts. Of course, not everyone is scared. Some still believe in the healing power of hot water, of herbs and rest. You hear whispers of secret bathers, people with their own hidden tubs, copper pots for heating water, lavender oil tucked in jars under the bed. But they're quiet. They know better than to speak loudly. Because bathing isn't just dangerous now, it's suspicious. You catch a whiff of rosemary on someone in the street, and suddenly you wonder, are they reckless? Are they cursed? Did they bathe? It's odd how fast the mind goes there. You remember when scent meant cleanliness. Now it's a red flag, because if someone smells too fresh, they must be tempting fate. And fate, as you've seen, has no patience lately. The church bells ring again. Another funeral. Or maybe 2. You stop counting. You glance toward the old bathhouse and remember something you heard as a child. The water remembers. It sounded lovely then. Mystical. Now it just sounds ominous. Still, there's something about the silence of the place that draws your eye. You wonder what the inside looks like now. Are the benches still there? Are the copper taps still fitted to the stone? You imagine the room filled with ghostly steam, old echoes of laughter and coughs. You shake the thought away, because no one wants to talk about what really happened. When the Black Death came to your town, it came fast. And one of the first places it touched? The bathhouse. At first, no one connected the dots. A few people felt faint after their soak. Then fevers. Then swellings. Then silence. You remember one woman. Hair always damp, skin always glowing. She swore by hot soaks and mint compresses. She was the first you knew who vanished. Then came the rumors. The bathhouse is cursed. Water holds the plague. Steam carries death. No one knows who said it first, but it spread like fire. Maybe faster. And once an idea like that takes root, good luck pulling it out. Historians still discuss this shift, the moment when public bathhouses became public hazards. Some point to cities like Paris and London, where regulations began creeping in. Others mention Italy, where bathing culture clung on longer, particularly in Florence, where the Medicis once built bathhouses into their villas. But in most towns, the doors closed quietly, and fear sealed them shut. You remember how it used to be, the routine of it. Bath day meant gathering your towel, chatting with neighbors, soaking your joints, even enjoying a small bowl of honeyed wine as you steamed. It wasn't just hygiene, it was relief. Now, relief comes from absence, from not being next, from not being the one whose door doesn't open in the morning. So the bathhouse sits, empty, heavy, and people invent new ways to scrub the itch away. One popular method now, herbal dusting. You blend dried sage, thyme, and barley powder. Then you dust it over your body with a feather or cloth. It soaks up oil, masks odor, and, supposedly, confuses the plague. Another method? Rolling in cloth ash. Literally rubbing yourself with the remains of burned linen, especially from funeral shrouds. They say the cloth remembers the dead and repels their sickness. You don't know how that makes sense, but sense isn't the currency anymore. Survival is. And then there are those who go full ascetic. No washing, no contact, no change of clothes. You know one man who has worn the same woolen robe since spring. It now smells like cheese left in a boot, but no one says a word. He hasn't caught the plague after all. Maybe he's on to something. You pass the bathhouse again at dusk. The air is cooler now, almost still. You stop for just a moment, just to look. You imagine what it would be like to step inside, to light a lantern, to fill the copper tub with warm water and lavender, to soak until the tremble in your bones finally calms. Just the thought of it makes you ache. But you turn away, because comfort is a memory now. And bathing? That's a ghost story. You step into the wind and tug your scarf higher. The city creaks on behind you, and the bathhouse waits in silence. The bathhouse isn't the only place tainted by fear. Steam itself has become the enemy. Once it signaled warmth, safety. A hot pot bubbling over a fire meant soup, meant family, meant life going on. Now it's suspicious. The wisps curling out of someone's kitchen window make passersby frown. What are they boiling? Why? Is it for food or something worse? Because where there's steam, there's heat. And where there's heat, there are open pores. And that, as you've been told 1,000 times now, is how it gets in. Which is ironic, really. Because the act of steaming, of using hot air to cleanse, to relax, used to be a treatment. A cure, even. In Roman times, you would have visited a caldarium for exactly that. Hot air, then hot water, then cold. It was considered medicinal, even luxurious. But by 1347, it's become something else entirely. A scandal. You hear it first in whispers. So-and-so keeps steaming herbs in their cellar. Did you know the baker still takes hot cloths to bed? Someone said her daughter was seen with damp hair at this hour. It would be laughable if it weren't so serious. You know of a midwife who was forced to move towns simply because she offered warm compresses during childbirth. One woman was accused of inviting demons into her home after being seen fanning steam toward her windows. That's the level of paranoia now. And it's not just about illness. It's about morality. Heat is indulgent, the sensual. The body softens, relaxes, opens. And when the world is clamping down, tightening its grip, shuttering its windows, anyone who dares to loosen up becomes suspect. You see this most clearly in the bathhouse gossip that still lingers. You remember stories from before the plague, mothers warning their daughters never to linger too long in the bathhouse, lest they lose their virtue. Husbands joking that bathhouses were where secrets floated thicker than steam. And now the joke's gone cold. Now bathhouses are dens of sin. Even the church is leaning harder into that narrative. Sermons warning that the body should be tempered, not indulged. That boiling your limbs in water is a slippery slope to boiling your soul. That's not to say everyone believes it, but it's just dangerous enough of an idea to keep you silent. Still, in quiet corners of the city, some resist. You hear about a widow in the southern district who still heats her own tub. She claims her late husband comes to her in dreams, urging her to stay clean for the next life. Another man in the north coats his body in beeswax and sits beside heated stones, creating his own dry steam therapy. There are even rumors of a secret bathhouse still operating in the merchant quarter. They say it only opens at night, only admits 5 people. You pay in coin and silence. And the steam is infused with thyme, eucalyptus, and clove. You've never seen it, but a boy with very shiny hair passed you yesterday. That's proof enough. You consider going, just once, just to feel your shoulders relax, your scalp loosen, Your skin forget it's under siege. But even as the thought tempts you, another part of your brain kicks in. What if you bring it home? What if the plague lives in the water? What if someone coughs, and the steam carries it straight into your breath? So you don't go. You heat a stone instead, wrap it in cloth, and press it to your stomach. It's not the same, but it's something. And even that small gesture feels risky. Historians still explore this strange chapter of steam suspicion. They debate whether the fear was rooted in health, in purity, or in politics. But most agree on this. Once the steam turned sinful, it took centuries to rehabilitate it. And meanwhile, people improvised. You see a growing trend now, herbal smoke cleansing. People burn bundles of dried plants, not to inhale, but to surround themselves in scented smoke. Lavender, sage, pine, even dried apple peels. They walk in circles, wafting the air toward their bodies. It's like bathing without water. Others prefer vinegar fanning, a method where you soak linen in vinegar, tie it to a fan, and wave it over yourself for 20 minutes a day. You don't sweat, but you definitely cough. That's probably a good sign. And then there's cold scrubbing, taking a stiff bristled brush and scraping your skin until it's pink and raw. No water, just friction. Some say it forces the bad out. Some say it stings enough to forget how scared you are. You try that one once. You stop halfway through, because deep down you miss being clean. Not just perfumed, not scrubbed, not covered in ash. Clean, water clean, but you can't admit that. Not out loud. So instead, you do what everyone else does. You mask, you powder, you fan and pray and sweep your house with lavender brooms. You fill your boots with rosemary and stuff your sleeves with fennel. And when someone coughs near you in the street, you hold your breath, not just out of fear, but out of habit. You dream of steam sometimes, of warmth curling around your spine, of air so thick and heavy it wraps you like a blanket, of your muscles melting into wood benches, of your skin humming under lavender-soaked water. You wake up missing it. But the day is cold, the sky is gray, and the bathhouse is still closed. So you press a clove to your tongue, sniff your vinegar cloth, and start the day. Clean enough. You've grown used to the perfume of panic. It's in every room, every alleyway, every folded scrap of cloth tucked beneath a sleeve. The city smells like rosemary, vinegar, thyme, and sweat. Always sweat. Not the sharp, post-bath kind, but the slow-cooked kind, baked into layers of linen that haven't seen water in months. And yet, no one complains. Not anymore, because the new rule is simple. Better to smell bad than to die clean. That's what people say now. Half joking, mostly not. So it's no surprise that the demand for scented protection has exploded. You pass a vendor in the square with rows of tiny cloth pouches. Pomanders, sachets, bundles wrapped tight with string and faith. Each one is labeled with a charming little name: Plague Guard, Saint's Pocket, Wife's Breath, No Fever. You buy one called the Widow's Whisper. It smells like crushed roses and old wool. You don't ask why it's called that. Others go bigger. You see noble women walking with pomanders chained to their belts, metal orbs filled with cloves, musk, or ambergris, swinging like protective bells. Some wear them like jewelry. Others carry two, one for each hand, held like weapons. They're beautiful. They also reek. But that's the point. Because at this point, smell is the strategy. The belief, good smells push out bad ones. And since bad air, miasma, is what carries sickness, then fill your world with powerful perfumes. Cloak yourself in them. Drown in them. You hear about a physician who only sees patients if they've smoked themselves first. Standing in a sealed room filled with burning sage and rosemary, emerging with eyes watering and eyebrows singed. One man says it cured his fever. Another claims he hasn't stopped sneezing since. You don't know what to believe, but you do it anyway. Your own house now has bundles of lavender hanging in every corner. The floor is dusted with dried chamomile. You keep a bowl of vinegar by the window and refresh it every morning. The scent stings your nose, but it reassures you. Even if it doesn't work, even if nothing does. Historians still wonder how people justified it all. Why smell became the battlefield of hygiene. But it's not so strange, really. You can't see plague. You can't fight it. But you can smell, you can act, you can do something, and that's better than doing nothing. Still, some people take it further. You hear about scent cloaks, coats lined with herbs sewn directly into the seams. Rich folks commission tailors to stitch in dried petals, bark, and rare spices. The richer the stink, the better the protection, or so the thinking goes. One merchant in the upper quarter is rumored to have a cloak so fragrant it wilts flowers when he walks by. You smell him once from 30 feet away. He smells like a cupboard in a perfumery, cloves, cinnamon, and something that might be dried fish. You don't ask, but you do notice something else. His family is still alive. Coincidence? Maybe, but what isn't these days? Meanwhile, the soap makers are desperate. Their trade is fading fast. Once in high demand, now they find themselves half ignored, half blamed. Soap was supposed to prevent illness. So why did the cleanest people fall sick first? One soap maker carves new words into his shop sign. For use on hands only, never the body. Another switches to selling scented candles instead. You pass by one shop and see a bar of soap sitting alone in the window, cracked from disuse, surrounded by dried petals like a funeral wreath. There's poetry in that. Still, you try. You carve your own scented wax, melted tallow blended with pine resin and orange peel. You rub it on your wrists before leaving the house. It leaves a film, a greasy sheen, and a smell that hovers somewhere between candied tree bark and burnt pudding. It's not awful, and it makes you feel better, because the war on water has been replaced by a war of aroma. You no longer scrub, rinse, or soak. You mask, you override, you do everything short of actually washing. There's even a new street phrase you hear, better perfumed than prepared for burial. You're not sure it's a joke, because you've heard stories. People buried in their best clothes, their bodies dusted in rose petals to confuse the soul. It's not just the living who get scented anymore. And on the quieter nights, when you walk past shuttered windows and herb-smoked doorways, you catch glimpses of it. The last flickers of old rituals. People waving incense toward their feet, rubbing clove oil on doorknobs, sweeping vinegar across the floorboards like holy water. You do it too. You don't even think anymore. You just move. 1, 2, 3 drops of scented oil on the wrist. A pinch of basil in your pocket. A whispered prayer as you step into the street. Because you still haven't bathed. And you don't know when or if you ever will again. You've developed an entire routine around avoiding the bath. It's not just something you don't do anymore. It's a philosophy, a rhythm, a new kind of hygiene, one built from layers of scent, superstition, and social survival. Your day begins with powders and ends with herbs. You no longer even miss the water. Not really. Okay, maybe a little. You've started to notice that your skin feels thicker. Not metaphorically, literally. Where once it was soft, now it's dry, patchy, sometimes cracked. You scratch your leg and a flake the size of a breadcrumb comes off. You tell yourself this is fine, natural, protective even. You're not the only one. Your friend Mateo says the dead skin is a kind of armor. It seals you up, he whispers, tapping the white dust on his knuckles. Nothing gets through anymore. He says it like it's a blessing. You nod and don't mention that you've started itching at night. But it's okay. You have a brush for that. A boar bristle brush, stiff as pine needles, which you run over your limbs every few days. It pulls away the worst of the grime, the loose hairs, the lint from your stiff linen sleeves. When you're done, you dust yourself with ground rose hips and shake out the brush like you're feeding the birds. This too feels normal now. And of course, there's your herbal schedule. Monday, rosemary sachets in your shoes. Wednesday, vinegar rinse for your combs. Friday, thyme oil dabbed on your temples. Sunday, no sense. Give your pores a rest. You laugh when you say that. Rest. As if your pores are employees. But humor keeps the fear at bay. Just like the rituals do. Even the church has softened its warnings lately. Some priests now recommend dry cleansing rituals. Prayer paired with powdered herbs, or standing in the smoke of sacred wood. One monastery nearby has even developed a cleansing chant, which is sung while rubbing one's body with lavender ash. You haven't tried it, but Lucia swears it makes her feel 10 years younger. She also hasn't bathed in 4 months, so take that as you will. You begin to notice who does what. There's a man on your street who wears cloves behind his ears and thinks it keeps his memory sharp. A widow down the lane ties a sprig of basil to each elbow to ward off night fevers. One family only steps outside after rubbing their faces with lemon peels dipped in cold milk. No one thinks these things are strange anymore. They're simply necessary. A culture of avoidance perfected into an art. But beneath it all, a question lingers. Is anyone still bathing? And if so, how? You start listening more carefully in the marketplace, eavesdropping on murmurs. You hear rumors of the astrologer's bath, a man who only bathes once a month, on a very specific alignment of the stars. He claims the sky seals his aura during that window. You don't know if that's true, but he looks healthier than most. Glowing even. There's also the legend of the herbalist's tub, a woman in the woods who bathes in hot water steeped with 40 kinds of herbs. Some say she sings during it, and the water never cools. Others say she was seen once with steam curling from her doorstep, and by morning, every bird in the forest had gone silent. You doubt that part, but still, you wonder. And then there's the story, your favorite, of the secret clean people. Supposedly, there's a hidden group living just outside the city, in a crumbling Roman villa with a working aqueduct. They bathe every full moon. They sing old songs in Latin. They scrub with olive oil and lavender salt. And they've never once fallen ill. You dream of them sometimes. The air filled with steam. The gentle drip of water on tile. The sound of laughter. Of comfort. Of skin that doesn't itch. But they're just a story. A fantasy built from hope and moldy scrolls. Because in your world, in your reality, there are no clean people. There are only the cautious, the scented, the sealed. Historians still debate the extent to which these folk rituals of non-bathing replaced hygiene in plague-era Europe. Some say the shift was total. Others argue people found ways to blend both, cleaning small parts of the body without drawing attention, like hands or faces, but full immersion, full, steaming, soap-filled cleansing, that was all but gone. Even the idea of bathing became rebranded. Now it's not about water. It's about process. You don't wash your body. You attend to it, like a garden you never quite water, but always weed. And now, as you ready yourself for bed, you follow your usual pattern. You dust your feet with sage. You swipe your arms with a vinegar cloth. You light a bundle of dried thyme and waft it around the room, whispering the same words under your breath. Close the skin, cool the blood, seal the soul. You lie down on rough sheets, tuck your arms close, and breathe in the spicy air. No soap, no steam, no warmth, but still, somehow, you feel cared for. Clean? Not quite, but clean enough for this world. The itch doesn't go away. It's not a rash, not something you can see. It's a deeper kind of itch, the kind that lives just under the skin in your memory. You wake up sometimes thinking you're still in a bath, toes flexing against slick stone, steam curling up your spine. But when your eyes open, it's always the same. Dry linens, cool air, and the faint scent of vinegar soaked into the wood beams. You've become so good at avoiding bathing that it's hard to imagine you ever did it. Your reflection doesn't look back at you from a mirror anymore. Those are luxuries for wealthier homes. You see yourself in puddles, in polished metal, in the sheen of your own eyes after another sleepless night. You look older, not because of age, but because of dirt, the slow layering of life without soap. Still, people say you look healthy. That's the new compliment now. You don't look touched. Not, you look well rested, or you've kept your color, but rather, you don't look like you've bathed. And that's considered safety. You overhear a conversation at the bakery. A woman confides that her cousin bathed 3 nights ago. Just a sponge and warm water, she says. Said she couldn't take the feeling anymore. Her voice drops. Now she's got the sweats. The baker tuts. Foolish. You open the skin, you invite the grave. They nod, exchange coins, and leave with loaves tucked under their arms. No one questions it, because the body has become a fortress, and bathing is a breach. Even in households with means, with copper tubs and servants and privacy, bathing is no longer a luxury, it's a liability. a whispered shame, something done under cover of night, if at all. And when it is done, it's a ritual of defense, not pleasure. A small basin, boiled water, clove oil added, one rag, dipped and wrung out until it's just barely damp. Pat, not rub. One limb at a time. Don't open the pores too much. Don't let the water linger. And afterward, wrap yourself tight. Stay warm. Say a prayer. Eat garlic. You know someone who only bathes during thunderstorms. To hide the steam, they say, so no one can see. It sounds ridiculous. But then again, what isn't now? The world has flipped itself upside down. The sun feels different. The rain, untrustworthy. You used to love walking in the summer drizzle. Now, you count the seconds you're exposed before darting under an awning. Even your dreams have changed. Gone are the fantasies of swimming, of floating on your back in cool rivers. Now your dreams are filled with slow scouring, with cloth brushes and herbal smoke. You dream of dryness, of cotton, of scratchy towels pressed against sealed skin. Historians often note this moment, this specific year, this fragile hinge in human behavior, as when the clean body became a threat, when healing became hiding, when comfort became indulgence. But they write about it like it was inevitable. It wasn't. It was a choice, made 1,000 times a day by people like you, people weighing risk, people staring at their own hands and thinking, I used to scrub these. Now I just anoint them and hope. Your own hands are calloused. From work, yes, but also from dryness. You rub balm into your knuckles, lard mixed with sage. It helps. A little. You don't speak of it, because that too feels indulgent. A cleaning cloth left outside on the line is now a sign of recklessness. You see one waving from a neighbor's sill and immediately wonder, are they careless? Are they trying something? Are they sick already? You hope not, but you avoid their door for a week just in case. Then there's the whispers of herbal boilings, the practice of heating strong-smelling herbs in a sealed pot, placing your head over the steam, and breathing deeply. It's a private act, almost sacred. You try it once with thyme and mint. You last 12 seconds before the fear catches up. You throw the cloth off your head and cough hard into your sleeve. Your heart races, not from the steam but from what it represents. Because even in private, even hidden away, you've internalized the fear. That water is a risk. That relaxation is a sin. That softness gets you killed. You're not proud of it, but you respect it. Everyone does. You hear about a nobleman who was exiled from his own estate, not for bathing, but for encouraging it. He brought in perfumed soap from the south, commissioned an artist to paint nymphs in his bath chamber. When word got out, the servants fled. He now lives alone, surrounded by tubs and empty halls. They call him the Damp Duke. You try not to laugh. You fail. But then again, humor is all that's left sometimes. So you carry on. You refill your sachets. You brush your teeth with burnt rosemary and salt. You polish your nails with lemon peel and wool. You comb your hair dry and tie it with cloth dipped in vinegar. And at night, when the city quiets and the stars come out, you sit by your window and wonder if you could just take one bath, a safe one, a quiet one. Would it still feel like sin, or would it feel like salvation? The clergy has started preaching about pores. Not directly, of course. That would be unseemly. But in hushed homilies and backdoor confessions, they weave together sickness, skin, and sin. Guard the body as you guard the soul. One sermon goes, do not open what the Lord has closed. You hear it and feel the room shift. People sit straighter, cross themselves tighter. A few pat their sleeves where they've sewn holy relics. A splinter from a saint's comb, a thread from a bishop's robe. It's easy to laugh, but hard to ignore. Because more and more, spiritual guidance becomes bodily instruction. Not because the church understands disease better, but because they're filling a vacuum. When doctors disagree, and neighbors spread rumors, and every breath might betray you, you look to someone who can tell you what's right, even if it's wildly wrong. So now, priests advise you to abstain from bathing the way they once advised you to abstain from gossip. Some orders forbid it altogether during Lent. Others say you may clean your feet in wine, but but not water. That you may cleanse your hands with ashes, but not soap. That to strip the body too bare is to strip the soul unguarded. And it's not just a metaphor anymore. You remember one friar in particular, Brother Hugo. He was once known for keeping his sandals spotless. Now he preaches barefoot, his soles caked in dust, his robe stiff with wear. The Lord sees not what is on the surface, he says, but what we protect beneath it. Still, not all monks agree. In some monasteries you hear of secret soaks, quiet indulgences, brother this or sister that who keeps a tub hidden behind the cloister garden. Not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. Arthritis, sores, mental unrest. But even these rare moments of washing are ritualized into silence. You ask a visiting monk about it once. He smiles gently and says, "We do not bathe for pleasure, but for penance." Then he offers you a bundle of dried marjoram and changes the subject. And beyond the walls of the monastery, even the language of cleanliness has shifted. Once, clean meant presentable. Now it means protected, not from dirt but from exposure. The nobility has adjusted accordingly. Where once they bathed to impress, they now layer to hide. You see women at court with 6 chemises under a single gown, their skin barely visible beneath ruffled cuffs. Men with collars so high they brush the bottom of the ears. Gloves worn indoors, scarves tied even in heat. One lady boasts that she hasn't let the sun touch her skin in 29 months. Another claims her linen undergarments have become so seasoned they repel evil entirely. You believe her, mostly because she smells like mothballs and rosewater filtered through fear. Historians call this the age of layered bodies, not just in fashion but in philosophy. The more barriers between you and the world, the better. Skin is no longer something to show, something to shield. Even the phrase airing out becomes taboo. You remember a friend who used to hang linens on the windowsill just to catch the breeze. After a few whispered warnings from neighbors, she stopped. "Better a little must than a lot of mourning," she said. And you've adopted the habit of oil blotting, patting your face with soft cloths soaked in lavender and olive oil. Not to clean, to coat, to seal. You do it after waking, after meals, and before sleep. The first time it felt silly. Now it feels sacred. The church approves. Oil was always a sign of sanctity, after all. You imagine a saint anointing their brow, not with holy balm, but with time-infused lard. Protect me, Lord, from vapor and vanity. Even confession has changed. Forgive me, Father, for I have scrubbed. The room goes quiet. The priest sighs. Was the water warm? You nod. He crosses himself and offers you a prayer, and a reminder, the Lord cleanses with fire, not fragrance. You leave with 3 Hail Marys and a renewed sense of self-preservation. Because in this new world, spiritual health and physical hygiene have become nearly identical. Don't open your pores. Don't expose your limbs. Don't tempt the wind. And if you must cleanse, do so with the humility of a penitent, not the indulgence of a Roman. You sit in the pew afterward, rubbing scented wax into your wrists, whispering your prayer. You don't feel cleaner, but you do feel obedient. Down in the countryside, far from the church bells and shuttered bathhouses, a different kind of logic prevails, rustic, homemade, and sometimes hilariously inventive. Peasants don't have the luxury of scented cloaks or clove-stuffed pomanders. They have vinegar, firewood, and faith in things that grow sideways in their gardens. And unlike city dwellers who whisper about open pores and miasma, country folk deal in folk wisdom, passed down through grandmothers, goat herders, and that one man who survived 3 famines and still looks 27. He's actually 60 and smells like old cheese, but never mind. You're visiting a small village now just for a day. It's not plague-free, but it feels lighter somehow. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's the sheer distance from stone walls. Or maybe it's that these people have simply made peace with dirt. You meet a woman named Alva who proudly explains her hygiene method. First, you rub yourself down with ash from the hearth, she says, holding up a bag of gray powder. Then you chase the lice out with boiled cabbage water. Only the brave lice survive. You blink, nod. She continues, After that, a sprig of nettle on each armpit. Keeps your humors humble. You're not sure that makes sense. But Alva looks like she hasn't sneezed since 1339, so you don't argue. Elsewhere, someone recommends rubbing horsehair soaked in mead across the chest every Sunday. Another says never to wash your feet during a new moon. It draws the rot inward. One man swears by placing garlic cloves under his tongue every morning until his mouth tastes like vengeance. It's easy to laugh until you realize that half the people using these remedies are still alive, and more importantly, still laughing themselves. And maybe that's the real difference. Out here, there's less fear and more pragmatism. If it grows in the dirt, they trust it. If it stings a little, it's probably working. If it doesn't kill you immediately, keep doing it. Most of them haven't bathed in ages, but they also haven't built an entire theology around it. They just say, the well water's for drinking, the sweat's for keeping wolves away. Simple, effective, oddly comforting. You ask one old shepherd if he ever bathes. Bathes? He says. I swim when I fall in. That count? You decide it does. Even so, you notice a kind of ritual cleanliness still baked into daily life. Clothes are shaken out over hedges. Bedding is left in the wind, even if it rains. Women sweep the thresholds with rosemary branches. Men wear wool soaked in cider vinegar beneath their tunics. It's not about removing dirt. It's about managing it, keeping it in its place, taming it like a stubborn donkey rather than trying to chase it away completely. Historians refer to this as hygiene by habit, not formal washing, but the small acts that, over time, keep a body alive and semi-fresh. A weekly oiling of the hair, a smoke bath in a chimney loft, a scrape with a blunt blade dipped in spirits. You even see a boy rubbing his face with a turnip. You ask why. Ma says it's good for skin, he shrugs, and it keeps crows away. You don't press, but not everyone in the countryside is casual. Some live in fear too. One family refuses to touch water at all. They boil it until it vanishes and claim the steam carries sins away. Another woman you meet wears the same cloak day and night, convinced it's absorbed the last breath of her plague-struck husband and now protects her. Rural logic is rarely unified, but it always runs deep. Still, even here, bathing is no longer just not done, it's not trusted. You meet a tanner who once bathed weekly, had a tub out back, even a sun-warmed stone. He tells you wistful. Now I look at it and feel a chill. He hasn't used it in 7 months. He covered it with planks and stores onions in it now. You can't help but chuckle, because it's strangely poetic. A bath turned into storage for plague prevention vegetables. That's the era you're living through. Everything is being repurposed. Water, once a source of life, has become suspicious. Steam, once medicinal, now dangerous. And even here, with open air and muddy boots, the shadow of the city's fear stretches long. Still, you breathe a little deeper out here. You even consider washing your face at the stream, just once. But when your fingers touch the cold water, something inside you recoils. Not because of logic, not because of theology, just because you've gone so long without water that you've taught your skin to be afraid of it. You back away, wipe your hands on your cloak, offer Alva a clove from your pouch. She sniffs it, nods, and tucks it behind her ear. No judgment, just two strangers, dirt-covered and thriving, in a world that's rewritten its rules. Nobility doesn't smell like roses anymore. It smells like ambergris and denial, like a perfume bottle trying to drown out a scream. You're in the capital now, walking beneath balconies draped in velvet and crests stitched with lion heads, and the air is thick with expensive fear. You used to believe that the wealthier you were, the cleaner you must be. Turns out it's the opposite now, because in these high-walled estates, where the rooms are grand and the servants are many, bathing has become the ultimate taboo. A betrayal not only of health but of status. Cleanliness, they say, is for the poor, for those who don't know better. You overhear a conversation between two nobles at a feast. They sip mulled wine from golden cups. Powdered wigs slightly askew, and one of them says, with genuine horror, "Did you hear? Lord Bastian was seen with damp sleeves." The other gasps, "In June." Exactly. They both shudder and change the subject to goat prices. It would be funny if they weren't deadly serious. Because while the peasants roll in nettles and scrape themselves with cider rags, the nobility are navigating a new etiquette, one where aroma trumps water and pretense replaces purity. You're invited into one such household, just for an hour, just to observe. The lady of the house greets you in 6 layers of fabric. You count them by the cuffs. Her skin is powdered bone white, her hair stiff with pomade, and her shoes are perfumed with crushed violets and beeswax. Her perfume makes your eyes water. She hasn't bathed in almost a year, and she'll tell you that proudly. She'll also tell you about her airing gowns, clothes designed to be worn only when standing near open windows, believed to collect healthy breezes and repel illness. About her vinegar fans, her cinnamon-sprinkled gloves, her gold-plated clove box, tucked into her bodice, just in case the cook coughs. This is hygiene, noble style. No scrubbing, no soaking, just layered defense and social ritual. One maid whispers that the chamber pots are cleaned more often than their owners. Another tells you the new rule of the house. If your reflection shines back at you, you're already too exposed. Even the royal court has embraced this logic. The queen hasn't entered her bath chamber since the winter solstice. Instead, she is refreshed with a blend of warmed linens, rosewater mists, and a ritual fanning with goose-feather paddles. Her physician, a man who wears gloves at all times and never makes eye contact, swears that actual bathing is unnecessary if the body is properly cloaked in vapor barriers and fortified with musk. You try not to laugh, but then you remember he's survived 2 plagues. Meanwhile, the king has adopted a bizarre but now imitated tradition. He smokes himself every morning, stands in a silk tent filled with sage smoke, and wears nothing but gloves and a fur-trimmed cap. He calls it spirit fumigation. The court calls it wisdom. You call it desperate. Historians later refer to this entire chapter as the era of aromatic authority, when your rank wasn't just about how much you owned, but how well you smelled while pretending you didn't need to bathe. Soap is out. Incense is in. Baths are a liability. But status scenting is the new craze. You see it everywhere. Noblemen carrying ivory-handled scent sticks, which they wave in front of their faces when walking near commoners. Ladies wearing garter sachets, filled with saffron and bergamot, sewn into their stockings. One duke has his entire dining room scrubbed with lemon peels before every meal. They can't wash themselves, but they'll wash the air. Still, it's not all ritual and rosewater. You spot the cracks. A courtier nervously scratching at his arms beneath layers of brocade. A lady's maid discreetly trying to pat a rash with a vinegar-soaked cloth. A young baron, barely 20, whose breath smells of copper and clove, more like medicine than mint. Because beneath the perfume, the same decay creeps in. Bacteria doesn't care about bank accounts, but no one dares admit it. They just fan harder, layer deeper, spend more. And so, you watch the dance continue. Lavender-drenched ball gowns, violet powder shaken into wigs, a royal baby baptized not with holy water, but with warmed rose oil and sugar dust. You return to your rented chamber, where you wash your face with cool water, alone, in secret, and feel rebellious. Not clean, not fully, but braver than you were before, because you touched water. And in this world, that's radical. You've heard the rumors, of course. Beyond the Alps, across the sea, over the desert and back again. Places where people are still bathing, openly, boldly, without shame or consequence. Places where the water flows free, the steam rises in public, and no one flinches when skin meets soap. Tonight, you lie awake thinking about those places. You imagine a city where the bathhouses never closed, where marble fountains still burble in courtyards, and terracotta jugs carry rosewater through shaded alleys. You imagine copper tubs warmed over open flames, with attendants pouring jasmine-scented water over your hair while a cat naps nearby. It isn't fantasy, it's just elsewhere. Because even as your corner of Europe seals its skin and fears its pores, other cultures never lost their trust in water. In the Islamic world, for instance, the hammam endures. You've heard stories from traders, men with weather-beaten faces and hands that smell faintly of cinnamon, who speak of Damascus, Cairo, Granada, cities with domed bathhouses, warm tiles underfoot, and steam rooms filled with laughter instead of suspicion. 3 rooms. One trader told you, eyes soft. One hot, one warm, one cool. You go in layers. You leave feeling new. You listened, half jealous, half disbelieving. How could they not fear it? Had they not seen what bathing had done here? But then he shrugged. We wash before prayer, 5 times a day. The sickness came, and still we washed. And you realize then, it's not just about hygiene. It's about identity, ritual, faith. In those cities, cleanliness is sacred. Washing is an act of worship, not vanity. And so when the plague crept in, their rituals didn't crumble. They deepened. Doctors still debated, yes. Some warned of open pores. But most believed water cleansed more than it cursed. There, the body wasn't a trap. It was a temple. And in other places, in India, the Ganges still draws bathers. Even when the air thickens with fear, people walk into the river each morning, whispering prayers, letting the water carry sins away. In Japan, the onsen, natural hot springs, remain open. Cleanliness is nearly synonymous with respect. People there believe in washing not just as a necessity, but as a shared social agreement. In West Africa, communal washing spots still buzz with activity. Children scrub each other's backs with laughter. Elders sit in shallow pools, telling stories, steam rising like incense around them. You lie there, flat on your back in your cot, listening to the creak of your wooden beams, and think, is the fear ours alone? Or is the silence louder here? Because it's not as though those places were spared the sickness. They just never believed that cleanliness was the cause. Here, the bathhouse is a memory. There, it's a daily habit. And perhaps most galling of all, some of those people look fine. You've seen the traders. Their skin glows. Their hands are soft. They don't scratch at phantom itches or reek of panic perfume. They smell like soap. Real soap. You remember one man who passed through a month ago. He spoke little of the plague, more of his travels. But when he reached for a coin, you caught a glimpse of his wrist, clean, smooth, with a faint floral scent. And for a moment you wanted to weep, not out of jealousy, out of memory, because your skin used to smell like that. Before the vinegar, before the soot, before fear told you that soap was dangerous and steam was betrayal. Historians still argue how much these global practices influenced one another, whether Europe's shift away from bathing was a religious divergence, a medical mistake, or simply a panic that snowballed. But one thing is clear, not everyone believed the bath was deadly. And now you wonder if they were right. If maybe, just maybe, this entire fortress you've built around your skin is holding in something worse than plague. The quiet, creeping erosion of comfort. Because while they step into pools with grace, you step around puddles with suspicion. While they sing in steam, you flinch at fog. While they wash away grief, you wear yours like a second skin. And so, as the candle flickers low, you whisper to yourself, maybe someday, somewhere else. Not a promise, just a wish. You wake with the sudden, absurd thought, maybe I should try it. Not a full bath, not something reckless, but just a rinse, a dab, a splash. Something more than cloth and powder. Something that touches skin with water, not vinegar, not ash. You sit up slowly, listening to the silence of your room. The hearth's gone cold. The coals gave up in the night. The windows are fogged. Outside, the world is gray and sluggish. But your mind is sharp now, alert in a way it hasn't been in weeks. You remember the trader's story again, the one with the hammams and the citrus-scented towels. You remember his wrists, his glow. You remember that feeling, long buried, of stepping out of a bath, skin tingling, limbs loose, lungs full. You want that, just a piece of it. And so you decide, quietly, carefully, you're going to wash, today. Not in public, of course. You're not that brave, or foolish. You gather your tools like someone packing for a forbidden journey. A clay basin, one pitcher of well water, a linen cloth, dried mint leaves for courage, and a single bar of soap, old and half-used, that you found at the back of a drawer weeks ago and couldn't bear to throw away. You heat the water just slightly, just enough to take off the edge. Not so hot that it steams. Steam is dangerous. Steam is visible. You keep the windows shuttered tight. You lay out the cloth. You dip your fingers in. It's cooler than you expect. It smells like nothing. Feels like everything. You bring it to your face. There is a moment of pause, a flicker of memory, a flash of sermons and warnings and street whispers, but you do it anyway. The water touches your skin, and the fear doesn't rush in. No thunderclap, no plague rat leaping from the rafters, no sudden shiver of death sliding down your spine. Just water, quiet, pure. You press the cloth gently to your cheeks, your forehead, your chin. You rinse and repeat. The soap, when you finally work up the nerve to use it, smells faintly of rosemary and long-lost summers. It's not dramatic. You don't collapse in relief, but something deep in your chest softens. Like a door, cracked slightly open. You clean only your face and hands. Nothing more, just enough to feel the shift. Then you pour the water out the back, dry the basin, and hide the soap again. It was a tiny rebellion, but it was yours. Later, you walk the streets with the same bundles tucked in your sleeves. Same scarf around your neck. Same quiet nods to neighbors. No one knows what you've done, but you do. You feel it in your fingertips, fresh and faintly tingly. You hear of others, too. A widow who washes only under the full moon. A blacksmith who accidentally spills water on his arms 3 times a week. A girl who sits beside the well and lets her feet soak in the trough while pretending to gather mint. The clean are returning. Slowly, secretly. They don't speak of it. They don't organize. But like embers under ash, the urge to feel water again is glowing. Historians refer to this phase as the silent soaks, a time when people began washing not because they could, but because they needed to, not to appear proper, but to remember something ancient and gentle and good. And it's not just for the sake of hygiene. It's for the sake of feeling human again. Because your body, despite everything, still remembers what it means to be cared for. You're reminded of this later, as you watch a child splash their hands in a rain barrel. No one stops them. No one scolds. They laugh, bright and unafraid. You smile. You keep walking. And under your scarf, your skin hums with the secret of what you did this morning. The clouds break just after noon. Not all the way, just a thin seam of blue overhead, like the sky is finally stretching after a long hunch. You stand in the street, face tilted upward, letting the cold breeze slip into your scarf. You catch a whiff of rosemary, probably from the vendor 3 stalls down who's been burning it nonstop since the equinox. But then, you smell something else. Soap. Real soap. It's faint, but unmistakable, floral, oily, and slightly alkaline. The scent pulls you toward it like a string, and you follow without thinking. It leads you to the alley behind the bakery. There, tucked between 2 worn barrels and a crumbling wall, someone has hung linens. Actual washed linens on a makeshift line. You stare at them for a moment. Damp, clean, flapping softly in the wind like a secret waving hello. You glance around. No one else seems to notice, but you do, because you've crossed that invisible line now, haven't you? Once you've bathed, even just a little, you start to notice who else might be doing the same. And just like that, you're part of a hidden world. The clean underground, you call it in your head, is not organized. It has no leaders, but you know it's there. A woman with unusually shiny fingernails at the apothecary. A man whose sleeves smell faintly of bay leaf when he adjusts his scarf. The little boy who doesn't flinch when mud splashes his legs, because maybe he knows he can get clean again. These people walk with a different rhythm, a looseness in their shoulders, a softness around the eyes. They still wear the same layers, still carry the same satchels of clove and thyme, but something about them is lighter. You don't speak. You don't need to. You just nod. The nod of the freshly rinsed. You hear murmurs about an old midwife who gives herbal rinses out of a covered cart. Not for illness, for balance. She sets up by the tannery on Thursdays. Her clients never come in pairs. They leave quietly, some with damp wrists, some just smiling, Someone tells you the tanner himself uses warm wine to rinse his hands at night. For the scent, he says. But you suspect it's more than that. Others are bolder. One blacksmith in the North Quarter now sells bundles of soap under the table. Not for bathing, he always says. Just for decor. But his regulars have never once asked about the price. They just slide the coin and take the bar. You buy one. You wrap it in cloth. You keep it close. And suddenly, you're part of a quiet rebellion. Because the truth is, the tide is turning. The fear hasn't vanished. No, but it's softening. Like cloth that's been worn thin. People are starting to question, if only in whispers. They wash their hands more thoroughly. They rinse their faces after dusk. They sit by wells a little longer than necessary. Historians call this the cleansing drift, the slow return of water to daily life, not through edicts or science, but through habit, through longing, through quiet acts of self-kindness. You walk through the market and catch a scent on the wind, juniper. You turn and see a young woman carrying a bucket. She's just rinsed her doorstep. No one stops her. No one stares. And that alone is a miracle. Later that night, you clean your arms again. Just the arms. But you press a little longer with the cloth. You let the water sit, warm against your skin. You rub a little soap into the crook of your elbow and watch the bubbles gather. They're small, shimmering, brief. You rinse. And for a few moments, you feel whole. Not invincible, just human. The fear will return tomorrow. That's the way of things. The city still tolls its bells. The miasma theory still rules the streets. The bathhouses remain closed, and vinegar still stains every doorway. But tonight you sleep clean. And nothing, not even the plague, can take that from you. The bathhouse door creaks open for the first time in months. No fanfare, no proclamation, just the sound of old hinges remembering their purpose. You hear it while passing through the lower quarter, and the noise stops you mid-step. You freeze. You look. You wait. A figure steps out, hooded, quick, avoiding eye contact. They vanish into the street like steam off a stone, but they smell unmistakably of cedar and mint. You don't follow. You just stare at the bathhouse. Still cracked, still shadowed, but unlocked. Later that day, you hear the whispers. They're testing it, someone says over bread and turnips. Just a foot soak, another mutters. I heard they lit thyme branches in the corners, a man adds, to ward off the old air. You say nothing. You chew slowly. You pretend not to feel your pulse in your ears, because part of you wants to go. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but maybe soon. You're not alone. Across the city, people are quietly returning to water. Not boldly, not often, but enough. Enough that the apothecaries start stocking soap again, labeled for laundry. But everyone knows. Enough that copper pots sell faster than grain. Enough that the old bathhouse matron, once thought long gone, is spotted buying clove oil in bulk. Even the children sense the shift. They splash more freely at the edge of the wells now. They trade rosemary sprigs like marbles. They dare each other to sniff soap and not sneeze. The fear isn't gone, but it's weakened, and with it comes something else. Something even rarer than rosemary or rosewater. Trust, not just in each other, but in the body again. You see it in how people walk, in how they greet one another, in the slow unpeeling of layers as the weather warms. You even hear of a woman who hung her washed sheets outside, not behind the house, but in front, in full view. She wasn't shamed. She was offered help. It's still dangerous, of course. The sickness hasn't vanished. But people are learning that fear can rot the soul just as quickly as plague rots the flesh. That avoidance isn't protection. It's starvation, dressed in safety's clothes. You visit Lucia. She's changed. Her hair is cleaner now, still wrapped, but softer. Her hands no longer feel like paper when they hold yours. She tells you she's been using a dry water method. It sounds ridiculous. She laughs. You both laugh. Then she shows you her secret. A small, flat stone basin tucked beneath her bed, filled with rosewater and lemon peels. I only use it on Sundays, she says, grinning. Don't tell the priest. You don't. You share a moment shoulder to shoulder, not fearing the touch. And for the first time in a long while, you feel connected. Not just to another person, but to yourself. Because the clean body is not just soft. It's sensitive. It feels. It notices. That's what bathing gave you long ago. Not just the rinse, but the re-entry. The way the world felt afterwards. Sharper, slower, more alive. You want that back. Not all at once. Not with trumpets, but piece by piece. That night, you don't just wash your arms. You wash your neck, then your shoulders, then your feet, each toe a quiet victory. You finish by lighting a small candle and holding your palms over the heat until they dry. You hum to yourself. Not a prayer. Not exactly. More like a lullaby. A soft, wordless thank you to the version of you that chose to return to water. Not to forget the fear, but to live beyond it. The city has started to murmur in new tones. Not the high, anxious chime of fear, but something lower, softer. A ripple of resilience. It's in the way neighbors glance at each other a beat longer, noticing the faint glow of skin under scarves, the subtle scent of herbs not just stuffed in satchels, but infused into oil for gentle dabs behind the ears. You notice it in window sills. A damp towel drying here, a bar of soap casually out to harden there. Once, that would have drawn suspicion. Now, no one says a word. Some even smile. It's not that people trust bathing again, not fully, but they've begun to trust themselves again. And maybe that's the real return. Because when the fear was at its peak, it wasn't just about water. It was about control. A surrender to survival that left no room for pleasure, no room for softness. The body became an enemy, a vessel for disease, a thing to be scrubbed with vinegar and denied comfort. But now, as the weather warms and the bells ring fewer times each week, something is changing. A boy runs barefoot through a puddle in the square. No one stops him. His mother watches, arms crossed, eyes tired, but smiling. An old man sits in a chair outside his shop with his feet in a wooden basin. Not hiding, not pretending, just soaking. And you? You return to the bathhouse. Not to bathe. Not yet. Just to see. The door creaks open more easily this time. Inside, it's quiet. Dim. You step in slowly. Dust floats in the air like memory. A few copper basins have been moved. The fire pit hasn't been lit in months. But someone has swept the floor. There's a small bundle of herbs on the bench. Fresh. You walk to the nearest basin and run your fingers along its rim. Cool. Smooth. Waiting. In that moment, you remember the full sound of a bathhouse in its prime. The splash of water against stone, the crackle of wet wood, the murmur of conversation, the hum of healing. You sit, not to soak, not to scrub, just to remember, because remembering is the first step toward believing again. Believing that water doesn't have to mean weakness, that steam doesn't have to be a threat, that the body, when treated with care, can hold more than fear, it can hold relief. You light a small bundle of dried lavender. Let it smoke. The scent curls through the air, wrapping around the old timbers, seeping into the cracks in the stone. It smells like endings and beginnings at once. And in that curl of smoke, you see the return not just of bathing but of being, of showing care to the self without guilt, of sharing space with others again, of laying down the weight of panic. Outside, you hear the clatter of carts, the chirp of birds returning to their nests, the quiet cough of someone who isn't dying, just clearing their throat. Life, in its slow and stubborn way, is asserting itself again. Later, you dip a cloth in warm water at home, not because you're rebelling, but because you're ready. You wipe your face, your arms, your back. You breathe in, you exhale. You are not a soldier anymore. You are not a vault. You are not dirt that must never be disturbed. You are a body, a living, breathing body, and for the first time in a long while, it feels like yours. You wake before sunrise, not because of fear, not because of coughing in the alley or bells tolling in the dark. You wake because the air smells cleaner, softer somehow. The city hasn't changed overnight, but you have. You rise slowly, stretch your limbs, and notice the lightness in your joints. Your skin no longer feels like parchment. It moves with you, not against you. You slept better, deeper. You dreamed, for once, not of plagues or prayer but of water, running over your back like silk. This is what healing feels like. Not a miracle, not sudden, but a gentle nudge back to center. Your morning ritual begins the same way it has for months. Warm cloth, rosemary bundle, a drop of clove oil on each wrist. But today you pause before reaching for the oil. Instead, you reach for the basin. You fill it, not just enough to dab, but to truly use. You pour more water than usual. Let it slosh. Let it shine in the early light. You roll up your sleeves. You press both hands into it, palms down. And you laugh, quietly, but fully, because you remember the way people used to say, "Don't get too clean. The sickness loves a scrubbed body." But now, you know the sickness didn't love the clean. It loved the cracks in trust. It loved fear. It loved silence. And silence is ending. You step into the day with skin that remembers the bath. It's not perfect. There are still eyes that watch too closely. Still whispers that haven't caught up with the truth. Still coughs in the dark. But there's also a girl skipping rope with clean hands. A market boy selling soap openly. A priest whose sermon ends with a blessing for those who care for their bodies, that they may carry their souls with gentleness. You walk past the bathhouse again. It's open, not bustling, not grand, but open. Hot steams in the courtyard. A stack of fresh towels, real towels, is folded on a wooden bench. No guards, no shame, just possibility. And so you enter. You're not alone. A few others linger, quiet, nervous. But they nod to you, not in fear, in solidarity. You take your place. You shed your outer layers. You step into the warm stone chamber. The air is thick with steam, clove, lemon balm, and the quiet hum of people remembering how to breathe again. You sit. You pour water over your shoulders. You feel it run down your back. And in that moment, something returns. Not just cleanliness, not just comfort, but belonging. You are part of the body of the world again. Not hidden, not armored, just here. You close your eyes. You let the water stay. You let yourself be. The bathhouse grows quieter as the light fades. You sit with your back against warm stone, water cooling in the basin at your side, steam rising in soft threads. Your body is still, every breath uncoiling with ease. You are not afraid. Not right now. The city outside still carries its burdens. Dusty streets, worried hearts, the slow turning of seasons. But in here, time has softened. Your limbs feel heavier in a good way, like velvet pressed against your bones. You tilt your head and listen to the small sounds of peace. Dripping water, fabric settling. A quiet cough that no longer sounds like death, just a tickle in the chest of someone who has also begun to live again. Maybe this moment won't last forever. Maybe the fear will return tomorrow in small ways, in old habits. But tonight, you've reclaimed something essential. Your body, your quiet, your right to feel okay. You dry yourself with care. Layer your clothes not as armor, but as comfort. You step back into your shoes, not to flee, but to return. The door creaks open once more. Cool air brushes your face, and you smile, because you are walking back into the world, not sealed shut, but gently opened. And that is enough. That is everything.